Welcome to the Pinelander Podcast, the official podcast of Pineland, broadcasting to you from an undisclosed location deep inside Pineland, where we discuss faith, family, finances, firearms, freedom, food, and everything else in between, with those who believe in living free and living out the values that made this country free. All right, welcome to the Pinelander Podcast. My name is Paul LaFavor. I'm here with my ranger buddy, Mike Blackburn. Today is Friday, the 10th of March, 2023. Today, we're kind of taking a break from where we were on the Warrior Virtues, and we are talking about nonprofit organizations, at least today. And we do have a special guest. They're always special. But we have the CEO of Silent Bridge, which is a nonprofit organization which has a global reach, and it's designed to help the defenseless. And so today we want to welcome the CEO of Silent Bridge. How you doing, sir?
Doing great. How are you doing, Paul?
Fantastic. This is something we've been wanting to talk about for a long time. And as you know, our listeners know, the Pinelander Podcast, we do fear God. We hate evil. And so you are definitely cut from the same cut of cloth, my friend. And I just wanted to start off with this scripture. James 1:27 says, "Pure and undefiled religion before God is this, to visit orphans and widows in their trouble and to keep oneself unspotted from the world." And so having known a little bit about Silent Bridge, I know that your mission is really to do that. What do you say to that?
Well, it definitely is. I mean, that is one of our main missions, is to help these young women around the world that have just had these horrific things in environments that they've been in. That's our main goal.
Yeah, and now for those, there's probably a lot of us don't know about Silent Bridge. There's a lot of nonprofits out there that rescue people from the clutches of evil. But what would you say, how would you describe Silent Bridge?
Well, Silent Bridge, I mean, the best way to describe it is really to understand the beginning and the start of it. I mean, what was the catalyst that started us down this path? And it started out with a trip that I was on, and I call it Country A. I was one night I got a knock on the door about 11 o'clock at night in that time, in that area. And there was a man there, and he tried to sell me a couple of young kids. And I didn't understand the language that well, but I understood what he was trying to do. I went to the front desk, and I told the front desk clerk at this place, it was a nice hotel for the area. And she said that they've been having trouble with sex traffickers coming in trying to sell children to what appeared to be wealthy foreigners, and I'm not proud of that. But when I left that location, I said, it's not really my problem. This is a third world country, a lot of problems. I can't fix it all. And flash forward months later, I'm in Country B, and I need to leave my hotel and some things I had to do. And I asked somebody at the front desk, I said, hey, I'm trying to go to kind of this area. What's the best way to get there? Because this is jam-packed with motorcycles and heavy traffic, as you see in a lot of third world countries. She said that the best, easiest way to get there on foot was to go across this bridge. And she warned me, though, that there was that area there was a lot of trouble with human trafficking and that also crime. And so I went that way, and I was approaching this bridge. It was an old Roman bridge, actually. I was approaching the bridge, footbridge, and I knew there's a lot of dog fighting in that country, too. And I saw this problem by the base of the bridge. Just all this dust was up, rolling around, and I thought, well, it's just a dog fight. Bunch of men around watching the event, and all of a sudden this girl breaks out of the event, and her clothes are pretty much torn off of her. She was probably she was probably 12 or 14, but the women there are pretty small stature, size, and um, she looked like about 10 or so. But anyway, she was running towards me, and I thought she was going to run right in my arms, which was the last thing I wanted to have happen at that point because of what was going on. And she turned right where she got to me, and she went up the bridge. She got about, it wasn't a long bridge, but she got about halfway up, and she turned around, and she looked back at me, and she looked just like my oldest granddaughter at the time. And then it became my problem. And from that, I left and came back, and I kind of sought out some other organizations that were involved with the human trafficking piece, and found some and went and volunteered some time with them. Saw what they were doing, and they all started with a good cause, and they still are doing good work. But at one point, I decided that I felt that the organization it'd be good to start an organization that's just not about us and talking about what we're doing and how we're doing it and operationally how we do things, but more focused on just the girls. And then from that, I started calling people and find people that were like-minded, that not talking about themselves, but not using their names, not doing videos about what we were doing, but just focused on saving these young women, as many of them as we could. And luckily, I had a pool of those kind of people. They just volunteered right away, flew from all over the country. We rented a hotel room and a big conference room with all whiteboards around the whole room, and we sat in there for days and came up with all kinds of ideas of how to start the organization, what would our mission be, where would we go. And we decided that we were going to focus on the places that nobody else wanted to go, because it was either too difficult, possibly too dangerous. And these were places that most of these men and women had been to in their other careers. And that's kind of how we got started. But then when they all left, it was kind of on just a small group of us to implement all those ideas. One of the more challenging things I think I've ever done in my life. And we started at it. And it was a challenge in the beginning because you're trying to find donations, you're trying to find how do you operate, you're trying to find make sure that people are trained properly before they go out the door, because each country is so unique and each mission is so unique. And so we were kind of hitting a brick wall for quite a while, but COVID, believe it or not, was a windfall for us. We were doing other things already, but it was a windfall for us because one of the largest brothels in the world that we wanted to get into, and we had tried pretty very hard for many months. We realized that, one day I was listening to the news and it's talking about that they had shut these brothels down, that the girls couldn't work, and they lived day by day. We knew that. The money they got day by day is what fed their children. And we started hearing the kids were starving. And so even some of the most evil people in the world can have a love for children. And we were able to convince the people running the brothel to let us come in and bring food supplies in. So we organized convoys of trucks and food and security for it and sanitation devices and people to train them. And we developed that rapport over months and months of COVID there with the women. And at one point in time, we decided we were going to approach the women and see, if you can't be released from bondage, can we at least focus on bringing out ones that had daughters that were reaching puberty? Because now the patrons were starting to tell the mothers, I pay you X amount per day for your services. How much would it cost me to be with your 11 to 12-year-old daughter? And that's how we started. That was one of our first major missions. That we call them safe havens. That safe haven now has a lot of. They were young women when they came to us, and now some of them are becoming adults. And the great story about that is that this last couple months, 3 of them decided they want to be doctors. They're very smart, and we're sending them to medical school, and they're going to go back and then treat the women in the brothel. That's going to be their mission. And one wants to be an attorney to work through the legal system to go back and try to help release other women, including their mother, from bondage.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, it's and you have I mean, there's a lot of needs out there, I think, but what I'm hearing is, I mean, you got a heart. I mean, this is the prevalence of human trafficking, and then like you said, you it ran across your path and you owned it. Uh,
Well, yeah, I think for any warrior that's been in uniform and has traveled throughout the world and been overseas, I mean, you can't help but bump into this, and it's extremely prevalent. I'm not. You probably have the stats on this. I mean, I'm not even sure if the governments that try to track this or the various different NGOs that actually try to maintain numbers of this are accurate. But I know for myself, no matter what country I've been in, I'm sure Paul's the same way. I mean, it's there. Sex trafficking is there. When you were talking about your story, where this is not my problem, the guy coming up and knocking on the hotel door. I think everyone's been there. I mean, if you've been overseas any length of time, I mean, you've had that knock. And I think all of us have done exactly what you've done, which is this is not my problem, because it's a huge problem. And some of it is not that you don't want to do anything, but it's almost like it's an overwhelming type of thing. It's like you wouldn't. It's like trying to save sea turtles or something. I mean, it's just there's just thousands and thousands. And your experience on the bridge, I mean, my goodness, how big of a problem is this? And is this we hear reports even on the southern border, where we're starting to see a lot of sex trafficking on our own porous borders. We've had whistleblowers. So how prevalent is this?
Well, it's really prevalent. I mean, one country, for example, in the Asian Pacific, contacted me just a couple months ago, and I call that country D, and they had 970,000 young women under 18 that were forced into human sex trafficking from that country, moved to other countries.
In what
One
type?
country
In what type of period of time?
in 1 year.
That's incredible.
So
that's
it's a,
astounding.
it's a, that's a million. That's almost a million young women. Another country that we were in recently, country A, there is a significant refugee camp there, and the traffickers come in at night and they'll tell like the fathers or single mothers because the husband died in the transit or during the conflict that they from the country they came from. Will come in and tell the parent, the surviving parents that hey, you have an older daughter here. You take care of 6 kids. We'll give your daughter a great job, and we're going to send you money, and she's going to come back and see you, and we'll even have you come and see her at least a couple times a year, and we're going to educate her. And they move these young women. We've documented this. They move them down to a port. From that port, they put them on transatlantic ships that are involved in some of this, and they move those women to other ports, and they're never seen again. Another country that we're in recently, I call that country I call that one usually country E. People come in from another country, and they'll come into a restaurant. They will talk to the owners of the restaurant. They'll see young women working in there as waitresses. A lot of them are orphans because of some of the things that have happened in that country, and they'll tell them, your daughter, she's so beautiful. And the guy will say, well, that's not my daughter. She's an orphan. I've taken her in. She's a good young lady. Well, I'd like to I just think she's beautiful. I'd like to marry her, and I'll send money back to you. I'll give you so much money right now. And then that girl disappears and never seen again. Then the last part of you asked about how bad of a problem this is. Country B that we operate in. There's a large city, one of the largest, capital city of that country, and same thing. A lot of orphans, young women that are orphans. They have no other place to go, and they will get jobs in restaurants. And these traffickers, they travel around to these restaurants, and they'll do that same thing. Your daughter, she's so beautiful. So many girls that we've rescued, we've interviewed, and they've said the same things, same story. That some of them have been right there when the traffickers said this, and they'll end up buying the young women. A lot of these women are sleeping in broom closets and stuff. They're working in the kitchen. They're cleaning up. They're waitresses, and most of them are 12 to 18 years old. Some of them a lot even younger. And then the traffickers, to bypass the mitigation efforts that are happening in those countries, will use like internal airlines to move the girls by airlines to a border point and then move them across. One country, country B, we bumped into this by accident last year. They were not only trafficking the girls and moving them to a large brothel in another country, they were also moving them to another country across the border for organ harvesting. Talked to the border guards that had kids that had come back across the border half clothed with scars on their sides where they'd had kidneys and livers removed.
Yeah, this is, I mean, it seems to me like I think all of us are kind of familiar with the world's oldest profession, which is sort of you're in country whatever, and you could find prostitutes from that country, from that community. I mean, they really don't need to go anywhere. So if you're from town A and state whatever, the prostitutes are from there that are known, but the whole thing now seems to be always moving them. They leave the country of their origin and they're always put someplace that's they're unfamiliar with. They don't understand the customs. They don't understand how the legal system works. They have no friends. It really even makes it that much tougher for them to change their mind, to get out of that profession, to escape or whatever. Am I seeing this right? Is this kind of the trend now? Is always to move from country A to country B?
Yeah, a lot of it. I mean, that's what's happening is that they'll take their documents away if they even have documents. Because we got to remember is that a lot of the war zones, that we probably all operated in over the years. When people leave those war zones, a lot of times they don't have paperwork. It's not like they went to some place and got a passport and got papers across the border. They maybe couldn't get to that location, or they came from such a austere part of the country they couldn't, and they're just trying to escape what they were involved in, and what was happening in their country. And we see you talked about the southern border. Same thing. Look at these the people that are coming across the southern border are coming from South America, Central America, 80 plus countries around the world. These young women are crossing the border. A lot of them are unaccompanied. Many of them have been sexually assaulted during transit. Because you can imagine, the environment they're in, trying to move from their point of landing if they're from outside South or Central America, and then they're crossing the border. And then once they get in the border, across the border, most of them don't have any paperwork. I mean, that's the biggest thing on the border, really documenting who these people really are and using biometrics. And we were on the border within the last 12 months. In two different locations, watching to see what the problem was. We were looking at the different NGO organizations that were there. What were they doing to try to help mitigate some of this problem? And there was really no mitigation taking place. It was only housing by some NGO organizations and very limited resources for treatment for what the women had been through. They were in total crisis, the ones that we saw. And we were down there looking at technology. How can we employ technology to mitigate the trafficking that's happening? because what happens when they move them across the border and they have no paperwork, these young women are moved to different homes. There was a home recently in a thing we were involved in where there was 13 girls that were in the basement of this big house, and it was all for sex trafficking. They were all from South and Central America. All those girls were. When they were rescued, not by us, but by law enforcement, they were interviewed. And when they were interviewed, it was in a private location. But some of our people were there to be able to listen to the story. It was just horrific what they'd all been through.
Hey, so I have a question. The two of them, really. The first is you mentioned some of the organizations that are doing this trafficking here south of our border. What other organizations? Is this like an organized form of, like some of these, I guess, groups down in Mexico? They have, the cartels. Do you have like cartel types that in our country A and B you're talking about that make this stuff happen, like a criminal organization?
Yeah, the ones they're moving the women across the borders there's two types, and this is just in my opinion from my observations and what I know and the ones that we've worked with, is that you have the cartels, the organized criminal organizations, and that's number one, that are providing the passages and the way to passage and the transportation, and also the handlers to get them up to the border. And then you have the opportunists who are on the other side of the border. So, for example, we know that we have many countries in the world that are having major conflicts right now. And one country, for example, is the traffickers. They have scouts on the eastern side of the border, and those scouts spot young women that look worn out, look tired, but they're attractive, and they're traveling alone. And they approach them and tell them that, hey, can I help you with your baggage? You're carrying a heavy load there. And this is when you get across the border. I got a friend that'll give you a ride. And when they cross the border, a lot of these guys are taking pictures of their cell phones, and then they're sending them to the person on the other side of the border. Once they cross this channelized point, then the trafficker identifies the woman, identifies himself as a friend of the person, and says, I'm going to give you a ride, never to be seen again. And that's kind of the way that they're doing that. So you get the opportunist, and then you have the cartels, and I've heard, we've all heard a lot of different figures. So I'm not into compiling the data. I just know what I see on the ground, and what I see on the ground is that organizations like the cartel, and there's organizations like that. You look in Europe, and what's happening is, there's a lot of state-sponsored mercenary groups, and those state-sponsored mercenary groups are very involved in this human trafficking piece too. They're already in areas that are war zones. They already see the vulnerable. And they're really, a lot of cases are a criminal element, and so they take that they see that opportunity and they get involved in human trafficking, as they do in drugs too. My opinion is that human trafficking is quickly approaching, the profit margin is quickly approaching what the cartels are accumulating from drug trafficking.
Yeah, I think we're seeing where the disease, if you will, this virus, this business, because it really is just a slave trade. That's what we're looking at. But we're starting to see it in legit. I mean, you kind of mentioned it, sort of legit government organizations. They're taking advantage of having people that are on the ground, have purpose, reason to be where they're at, doing what they're doing, engaging in nefarious illegal activity. We're starting to see more and more of that. We're starting to see that in various different, not even just NGOs, but even just like you said, government contracting, and a lot. Every now and then you'll see the reports and the articles coming up. So this is a huge, major problem. It's an infestation, and I think these organizations are extremely dangerous. So it's what does a young lady do when she's caught? What are her choices? I mean, how does is it even possible for these ladies to get out, and how difficult is it?
Well, it depends upon where they're at. So, for example, like we're focused a lot on child brides and women that other women that were forced into sex labor. So, some of the women, for example, child brides in country A, they are given away, by their family to usually some man that could be, 50, 60 years older than them in some cases. And sometimes they they will run away, and it happens a lot. They get on the street, and there will be these handlers that are on the street that are women, that are motherly looking type women that'll find these young women on the streets. And this one country I was in, there's so many of them out there. It's unbelievable. And it's like a market. These motherly women, looking women will befriend these young ladies. They feel that they were forgotten by their family, given away by their mother and father to a horrible environment, and they don't like the tradition, and they run away. And then this lady will become their friend, and the next thing she knows, she's in a brothel. They will. I've interviewed several of them. What happened is pretty much the same story. They're brought in, and a man comes in. They're locked in a room. A man comes into the room, says, "I'm going to be your best friend the rest of your life. I'm going to take care of you. Sorry about what happened to you. You were given away by your family. We're your family now." And then he goes out the door, and another man comes in and beats her for about 15, 20 minutes. And then he goes out, and the other man comes back in and says, "Hey, I'm really sorry about that. I don't know what his problem was today. That won't happen again." And then the door opens again a couple hours later, and a man comes in and rapes her 2 or 3 times. And then he leaves, and the guy comes back in. After about 3 days of that, they're totally submissive, and they get them cleaned up over a week period of time, and now they're working in the brothel because they don't want to get beaten and raped again. Forcibly, they become very submissive to just service the men that they're given.
Mm. Yeah.
Well, okay, so
I often
well,
what's that?
I'm thinking there's a couple challenges. Number one, you got to find these ladies, and then of course the other challenge is, like you just mentioned, is okay. They're already in a traumatized, psychological, bad place. What are you doing with that? I mean, how are you taking this person? Are you looking for those that there's some sort of glimmer of something still there that can be harnessed, that can be leveraged? You're trying to find these ladies that look like they're trying to get out of that situation and providing them the hope. Because it seems to me you just can't just come up to one of these ladies and just say, "Hey, come with me. Forget this. Let's go live a different life." I mean, some of these ladies have been seriously traumatized over a long period of time. Is that the case?
Well, that is the case, and that was one of the unique challenges we had. I talked earlier about the whiteboard exercise, and we got all done with that. I was like, looking at the board, and I mentioned that I said, all these other organizations that I kind of volunteered for to work for us, they were really into the rescue part of it. It's like, let's go get them, but then it's the what then? Like, what do you do with those girls? So that's what you're talking about. Like, what do you do with them? Number one, how do you find them? But number two is, what do you do with them once you have them? And what I found is that a lot of organizations had no plan. And I remember being in a room one time, somebody wrote up on the board, "Have a plan." I was like, "What the hell does that mean? Have a plan?" Have a plan. I said, I was young, very young guy at the time in the military. It's like, have a plan. And you look at that, have a plan. So I said, "What are we going to do with these women when we rescue them? Where are they going to go?" I said, "Well, there's going to be some NGO organization that wants to take care of them. That's not our deal." And then I started calling organizations. "Hey, what do you do with the women?" well, we rescue them. So, well, where do they go after that?
Hmm.
You know, and so we
You just had to
decided that,
build
hey,
this thing from
we're gonna have to,
scratch. Yeah.
we got to build them. We have to build a place to put these women. So
Wow.
that's what are we gonna call them? So I said we're gonna call them safe havens. So first we had to build a safe haven before we started. So every country now that we go into, we build the safe haven first. We get it all completely
Mm.
staffed, get the staff trained, and then the women. We start doing the rescues. Now, then the question about how do you find these women? Yeah, I think that was one of your points. How do you find these women? So each country, of course, as we all know from our travels, has a unique culture, unique religions, unique languages, different dialects, different customs. And so we try to build a program based upon that country's unique religions, unique cultures, etc. And so country B, for example, outreach program for for we break the rescues down in what we call hard rescues and soft rescues. So we don't do very many hard rescues because hard rescues you end up in a prison in a foreign country. I don't want to do that. Soft rescues is when you try to work with the local villages, the local provinces, the local government to try to have them tell you about women that are in crisis or could be in crisis. Um, and that's how we approach that piece. So and then the question comes about like we can't do this in country C, but we can do this in country A. But country A, we have Safe Haven 1, and we're going to move to Safe Haven 2 pretty soon. We're at that point at that country. So Safe Haven 1 is it's not where we're going out and rescuing the women that are actually involved in the sex trade. We're rescuing the children of women that are in the sex trade that are reaching puberty. So what we do is we bring the children in first, and then we do our little twice a month. We let the children meet with their mothers in a benign location, and so that they can see how their children are doing, how they're progressing, and know that they know we're taking good care of them. And now we're getting to the point where some of the mothers are at the end of their bondage. So during those interviews and times with their children, that visit with their children, our workers talk to the mothers and say, like, well, how much do you have left for your bondage? And they may say X amount of dollars of that monetary funding that they use there. And if it's low enough, then we're to the point now we're going to offer to the brothel workers or the handlers of the brothel to buy them out.
Mm.
And then they're going to the women, the mothers will go to Safe Haven 2, and this is how we make them a whole person again. They go to Safe Haven 2, they're going to go through the counseling from the trauma they've been through, the medical care. These women need amazing medical care. Just the children we bring out need a lot of medical care. But you can imagine the horrific injuries some of these women have. And then once we get them where they're relatively whole, then we start the reunification of the mother and their children. And that's in Safe Haven 2. The children still go to school in Safe Haven 1, and it's a faith-based program that we do. And then at that point, then once they're whole enough, they have two options. In country A, we have some people that own a factory. It's a clothing factory, and it's not a sweat factory. It's a very nice place. They are faith-based people and great people, and so they can either go be trained and work in the factory and make a decent wage and survive and support their children, or um, we will give them funding, seed money, if you will, to start a business. And I won't talk about the business, but it's technically based and it's very cheap to start in country A. And they can pay us back over a small period of time so we can fund other women. And then we'll help them get housing and move them on from there. That's in country A. Country B is a different story. I mean, country B is um, the people are there and the villages will talk to you about. I think this girl's at risk, or mother and father were killed, or her mother. Her mother was her only parent alive, passed away, and she's an orphan, and she's going to be at risk because they know the traffickers. They know who they are, and this trafficker is kind of focusing on her, and we think she's going to end up disappearing one day. And so then we can move her to the safe haven, and that safe haven is at a place that's so austere. I mean, it's like nobody's going to come up there. It's about a 16-hour trek to get to that safe haven. So uh, yeah, so that gives you a little bit of an idea of what we're doing. Because Country C is a war zone. It's totally different. You know, what we're doing there is we have to work with the local government. They're moving in and out just for safety reasons, and so they know why we're there. And they've been great to work with, though. That Country C has been an awesome country to work with. They've been helping us, giving us a lot of resources.
Well, I think you brought up something that a lot of times is overlooked, and that is the importance of removing the children from their parents' current situation. Because I think it's important for these kids to see something else other than that lifestyle. Oh, is that true, Randy?
That's very true. I mean, you see, I never show people the pictures. I'll show donors, the pictures of the children afterwards. I never show them what they look like when the sensationalization of it when we first get them, because sometimes it's just horrific, and because it's hard for us to, from the benefits we've had of living in the United States, it's hard for us to understand. If you can imagine a woman that's in a basically a 6x8 room, and has got one bed, and everybody sleeps in the bed, and she's got two children. She's 18 years old or 17 years old. She already has two children, and the children, because she can't let the children go outside of the room because of the pedophiles that are also wandering through the brothel, they have to lay under the bed while the mother is performing her services. And
Wow.
and that's 6 to 8 times a day in the brothel in Country A. And so when we bring the kids away from that, the first week or two that they're in the safe haven, quite often we have to have plastic sheets on a bed. It's in a separate room. They're away from the other girls, and because they wet the bed multiple times during the night, and until we can get them kind of calmed down and then reintegrate them in with the children that have kind of gotten over that part of it. But yeah, they're very traumatized. It's a tough thing to see and tough thing to deal with. But then I do show people pictures of what they look like now. And just last night, I'd been awake about 24 hours working on some other stuff, trying to develop funding for another project we're doing. And I said, damn, I'm tired, And I pulled up one of the pictures of what they look like when we first got them, and then what they look like now. And that kept me going for another several hours.
Hey, I was
working on stuff.
I was going to ask you on that note because I'm curious to know of the success stories. Like something like you're kind of going down that road, something that is meaningful that you could share with us.
Sure. I could tell you success on a rescue success story, and I could tell you a success story about where the girls were and where they're at now. So we ran into a problem where we couldn't get to these girls that we were being trapped in, and we were trying to figure out how they were moving them, and I think I might have mentioned earlier. So they were bypassing roadblocks using an internal airline, and so we tried to talk to flight attendants, and the flight attendants, the airline, they wouldn't help us because they were worried about what the government would do if they found out they were helping us do that. Because there's a lot of power by these organizations that are doing this human trafficking. They make a lot of money. So we found family members that had family members that were flight attendants, and they agreed to let us give them a way to communicate with us and give them a class about how to identify traffickers. And they did it very successfully. And so they would contact the who they believe is a trapper, fit the profile and plane, and they would spend a bit more time paying attention than the others, and then they would call them. They'll let us know that before the plane took off, from their initial assessment, if there was one on the plane, they believe was one, and then when they landed, they'd say that based upon where we trained them, they confirmed it, and we'd be waiting there, and then we'd have somebody from that country, a national from there that was working with us, approach the person and say, "Well, your daughter, she looks just like my daughter. She's so beautiful." And in that country, and when an older woman addresses you, you look her directly in the eyes. And when the girls would do that, that was kind of another indicator. And then our assessment from, about 100 feet away to watching what was happening, the interaction. And we say, "Yep, it's a go," and we would, boom, we were gone with the girl. And we had to do that because the trackers, once they reached the vehicles, were armed. And we'd be out of, get out of Dodge and get them to a safe place. That was the first one we did with that. Seeing her picture the next day, she knew she was away from what she was about to go to. She knew what was coming. That smile on that face, that's one of the pictures I looked at last night. So that was a major success story. It was a challenge on how to figure that. We had to spend about a month on the ground to figure that out, how we were going to do that. Second success story is Country A, and I might have mentioned that already, is here we had young women that came in at a fairly young age. Their mothers were sex workers. They were living under the bed while their mother was providing services during the day, all day long, trying to shut that out of their mind. And now all of a sudden they're in a safe place. They can study, they can get education, they can realize that they can be somebody in their lives. And those three girls are in the picture I looked at. Actually, four of them in the picture I looked at last night. They give me a little motivation. And those are three that and they don't just want to be doctors; they're gonna be doctors. And the other one wants to be an attorney, because those three girls have made a decision. They want to go back into the brothels because doctors don't go in there, and treat women like their mother, to make them as whole as they can until they can leave. And then the other one wants to fight it within the legal system to try to get women released from bondage that are underage or don't want to be there. And so, to me, those are huge success stories that we've had. And also the cost of doing this, the success story part there is we run a safe haven right now in Country A. It's got 20 women in it for under $100,000 a year.
Wow.
It's got 13 full-time staff.
That's fantastic.
And it's a beautiful building. I mean, it's a beautiful building. 13 full-time staff and 20 women. And we're going to expand this month. We're bringing in 10 more women in there, and those are all going to be daughters that are reaching puberty. Their mothers are sex workers in a huge brothel.
So I kind of like the approach to this. I think you've got the right approach. Let's talk about the logistics involved in this, because I think it's a lot more complicated than what people would think, and the kind of costs that are associated with those logistics. I mean, you just talked about having to have a building, counseling, people to maintenance for the building, people that work there take care of the actual victims. But that's just one piece. I mean, you have to have people in country to do these things. You have to do surveillance for a certain amount of time. I mean, let's talk about all that, and because Silent Bridge is involved in all of that. You guys are doing the hard work, but it takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of money.
Yeah, it does. I mean, and surprisingly, we do it for a pretty low price. So we're about at 99 cents on the dollar of donations for operational cost. I mean, 99 cents goes to the operational part of it and the logistics part of it, and 1 cent goes to running the organization. But yeah, it's costly. I mean, that's why we do most of it overseas. A lot of people say, why aren't you doing this in the United States? There's a huge human sex trafficking problem in the United States. Well, the reality is everybody wants to pass some regulation and some law, and the minute you take a girl into your arms into custody, rescue her or something, then the clock starts ticking. You got to send her to counseling so many times a week through, and the counselors not they don't want all volunteer, so you got to pay them. It's the type of trauma they've been through. You could pay anywhere from $150 to $250 an hour for that type of counselor, and so it's easy for one girl to cost you $60,000 or $70,000 a year. And like I said, I don't know. Ones in the U.S., yeah, I'd like to do it. The logistics piece, I mean, the 4 missions we've done these are preliminary missions in country D this last year. That was about $175,000 just getting people over there, the logistics of moving the workers into the place, getting eyes on the bad guys, trying to figure out who they were, how they're operating. And they're almost $200,000, and we haven't even built the safe haven there yet. But it's being built right now. Actually, 2 of them are. And then, so part of it too is, if you're working in a war zone, we are doing some operational stuff in a war zone area now. And so one of the board members, super smart guy, he brought up, he said, we should go to mobile safe havens for this area. I said, God, what a great idea, man. Why didn't I think of that? And so he found this company that brings in on flatbed trucks, these 10 mobile units is on one flatbed truck, brings in, they're all stacked up and they just fold up and out. And you can put about 10 people in each one, and they have bathrooms and all that stuff too. And it's way cheaper than going in and taking a psych hospital that's got 20 rooms in it that's been abandoned and remodeling it, and getting rid of any mold that's in the walls and getting the plumbing fixed and putting in hot water heaters and that kind of stuff. And then if we got to move it, if the combatant area becomes too intense, then we can move it across the border into a safe country and reset it up, and we still have the safe haven. And so that's the logistics piece. That's a challenge that we've been working with right now, because we're hopefully going to pull the trigger on that in the next month or two, set that up because of what we think is coming here pretty soon. Yeah, I mean, it's a logistics piece. Trying to find, dealing with the U.S. part of it, being a nonprofit, and you have somebody give you, donate money, and then you have to send the money overseas, right? Well, then everybody starts watching you. Why are you sending these people $10,000 a month? Is it really going to a nonprofit? And how do you keep that from getting, identifying the people that are doing the operational pieces of it? That's a challenge.
Because a lot of these, because this is this can be kind of dangerous. And so the anonymity is important. I can see where the anonymity would be very important, especially when you're up there really trying to get, see the pattern of life, see what's going on, see what's happening, how they're moving them, where they're coming from. This is all very dangerous. This is big money. These people are not interested in having some goody two shoes come in and spoil their gravy train. Silentbridge.org. That's the website. I definitely want the listeners to go there, check out silentbridge.org. What's the best way to give to Silent Bridge, whether it be money or time?
So if they go on the website, silentbridge.org, they can see that there's they can see the donation. The donation page is on there, and if There is one country that's listed there that is specific to that country because of the funding that's needed there. They can donate just to that one. If they donate on the general part of the donation page, it helps support all of the other countries, and they can see what we do on there. They just don't see the exact country. They can see our focus on that website of the groups that we are focused on right now. And again, and they'll be able to figure out kind of what countries they are.
Yeah, it's
And
kind of
everybody has their own interest.
yeah. And what I really like about Silent Bridge also is you're going where places where other people just aren't going. And really, those are the places that need to be visited and where there needs to be intervention. Because generally, this is where sex trafficking really thrives. Is in like you mentioned earlier, war torn areas, third world areas, not the most pleasant places, and places where these cartels and these organized crime organizations are extremely dangerous, and they exert a large amount of influence over the populace and in some cases even the government.
Well, definitely, we call them we always say the forgotten few are really the many. The forgotten few are really the many, and that's because these areas that people don't want to go to because of how challenging it is. They are dangerous areas, and but there's so many people there because of that need help, and they're just lost. They're just lost. They have nobody. They've lost hope. So we want to give them hope.
Well, I'm hoping
And
there's no doubt that you're making an impact on this problem, and this is a huge problem, and I'm glad to see that you and the other people that are associated with Silent Bridge, the quiet professionals, the quiet warriors that are just getting in there and trying to make a difference in one person's life at a time. My hat's off to you. I mean, God bless you.
Fantastic. Hey, and I know that you also depend upon charitable donations. So for listeners, you can go to the website, Silent Bridge, and you can, as your heart has been moved, as you've heard some of these stories, and I think that's what we've been hearing from you as a CEO of Silent Bridge, that you couldn't unsee what you saw, and you can't unhear what you hear, and then it's your responsibility to do something. So, and so my hat's off to you, my friend, for doing that.
Anything else you want to leave with us before we end this episode concerning Silent Bridge or where you're going? Or
yeah, I just thank both of you for the time you took to do this. This is the second podcast I've done in the last week, and it's people are becoming more and more aware of the problem. People often ask me, what's the best thing I can do? Is it donate money? Is it volunteer? And of course, we always appreciate donations. We always appreciate people volunteering. But the biggest thing people can do is become aware. Self-awareness. Just start. The internet's a powerful tool. Type in there and read about the human sex trafficking. Understand what a horrible, horrible thing it is. The most rewarding thing you can ever have happen to you, I think, in my life anyway, other than accepting Jesus Christ as my Savior, is that the most rewarding thing you can do is to walk into a room of 10, 15, 20 girls that have been saved from this environment and feel safe, and have them all jump on you, hug you, throw flowers on you. There's nothing else you can do. We donate. We have two small companies, and we donate 100% of all profits. 100% of all profits from both the companies go to supporting what we do, because we believe in the mission. And
it's fantastic.
But become self-aware. That's the biggest thing to me.
And remember, you don't have to travel to a third world country to see this. I mean, this is happening in our own cities, in our own states, in our own southern border. This is a huge multinational global problem. It is modern day 21st century slavery. There's huge money in it, lots of power, and we're seeing. Thank goodness for people, organizations like Silent Bridge that are attacking this thing and shedding some sunlight on it, and really helping, like you said, making people aware is the main thing. This is happening. Don't be the person that just shuts the door and ignores it and says the problem's too big. All of us really need to be involved in this.
Yeah, thank you for my friend for doing that. Thank you for being out in the trenches, going out to areas where people don't want to go or they don't know about. For people that they're the unknown many, like you said. So listeners, you can go to silentbridge.org. And, if I could also ask you, as the CEO of Silent Bridge, if you could close us out in prayer.
Definitely. Thank you for the honor of doing that. Lord, thank you so much for all you've given us, for the opportunity. Thank you for Paul and Mike for bringing this message to their listeners. I'm so thankful for the strength that you've given everybody that is fighting this horrible problem. I'm thankful for the men and the women that I've met in doing this task. And thank you for the strength that you continue to give all of us in serving you and serving these young children around the world that are in need. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Pinelander Podcast. If you enjoy our unique content, please consider supporting our sponsors. SOF News, providing special operations news from around the world. It's where Paul and I go to keep abreast of what's going on within the SOF community. Check them out at sof.news. Blacksmith Publishing, been serving the warrior class since 2013. They have great titles written for warriors by warriors. If you're looking for excellent reference material or just want to unwind with a great novel, be sure to check out the bookstore located at blacksmithpublishing.com. And if you're looking for some cool Pinelander apparel, head on over to the general store located at pinelandergeneralstore.com. That's all one word, pinelandergeneralstore.com. Have a great selection of shirts, hats, jackets, sweaters, stickers, patches, artwork, and a whole lot more. Check out the store at pinelandergeneralstore.com. If you're interested in helping develop our country's next generation of warriors, please consider donating to the American Agoge Project. The mission of the project is to foster an environment producing able-bodied citizen warrior men of fine character. And we'll be officially launching the project in 2023 in celebration of Blacksmith Publishing's 10th anniversary. Until our next meeting, stay mentally and tactically smart, physically and spiritually strong, and socially astute. To each other we pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. May God continue to bless Pineland.